under attack. Again, strikes reported across the country, explosions in all major cities in Ukraine. This Russian invasion has begun, according to Ukrainian authorities, calling it a full-scale invasion now underway. And the Belarusian troops again joining them from the north, at least. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin, however, announcing this military operation yesterday and warning other countries any attempt to interfere would lead to, quote, consequences they've never seen, close quote. Putin argued this attack is aimed at protecting civilians in eastern Ukraine. Now, as he maintains his harsh rhetoric towards Kyiv authorities, here's more from the Russian leader.
I have made the decision of a military operation. Dear comrades, your fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers did not fight defending our motherland for today's neo-Nazis to seize power in Ukraine. You took an oath of allegiance to the Ukrainian people and not to the anti-people junta that robs and harasses its own people. Don't follow its criminal orders. Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so, to create threats for our country, our people should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history.
On the Ukrainian side, President Zelensky held a phone call in the early morning with U.S. President Biden. Biden attempted to reassure his Ukrainian allies of some upcoming measures to contain and ostensibly punish Russia, with efforts to ramp up at the United Nations. But in Kyiv and under fire, President Zelensky again spoke to his embattled nation as they brace themselves under this Russian offensive. Here's the latest from the president.
We know for sure that we don't need the war. Not a cold war, not a hot war, not a hybrid one. But if we'll be attacked by the enemy troops, if they try to take our country away from us, our freedom, our lives, the lives of our children, we will defend ourselves. Not attack, but defend ourselves. And when you'll be attacking us, you will see our faces, not our backs, but our faces.
The
war is a big disaster. And this disaster has a high price. With every meaning of this word, people lose money, reputation, quality of life, they lose freedom. But the main thing is that people lose their loved ones, they lose themselves. They told you that Ukraine is posing a threat to Russia. It was not the case in the past, not in the present, it's not going to be in the future. You are demanding security guarantees from NATO, but we also demand security guarantees. Security for Ukraine from you, from Russia, and other guarantees of the Budapest Memorandum. But our main goal is peace in Ukraine and the safety of our people, Ukrainians. For that, we are ready to have talks with anybody, including you, in any format, on any platform. The war will deprive security guarantees from everybody. Nobody will have guarantees of security anymore. Who will suffer the most from it? The people. Who doesn't want it the most? The people. Who can stop it? The people. But are those people among you? I am sure.
Now we go to our defense correspondent, Jonathan Reggett, who's on the ground here covering some of the latest now. I believe you're at the Russian embassy in Tel Aviv here. Jonathan, what's happening there?
Yes, so at the Russian embassy, and maybe, David, you can see right behind me a small protest for the moment. This is right outside the Russian embassy in central Tel Aviv. This protest is expected to grow larger in number later in the day. And one of the protesters, Mikhail Bagani, is here joining us. Mikhail, thank you for joining us. I understand you arrived to Israel from Ukraine a few years ago, actually from the area of Donetsk, which was under partial Russian occupation already. What are you feeling this morning?
This morning I read the news, and I thought that I cannot be silent anymore, because I saw that this Russian Federation, this fascist Putin's regime, they started the complex war in Ukraine. They started with shellings, with bombings, and I think that international community is doing not enough. We're doing not enough pressure on Russia. We need to stop this fascist regime, because all they're doing is neocolonialism, and they're just trying to destroy Ukrainian state. the independent, the sovereign state of Ukraine. They're trying to destroy it. They're trying to destroy Ukrainian culture. And I think we need to talk louder about it.
Have you been able to contact relatives in Ukraine to hear what's the situation there?
I contacted with my friends in Ukraine in not controlled in areas not controlled by Russian supported troops, and they worry about what's happening, but they are calm. They're standing and they're ready to protect their houses, protect their families. And I want Russian soldiers to know that no Ukrainians want to war with Russia, but your government started the war against Ukraine, and you need to know that Ukrainians will protect their houses, their families, their children, and they will never surrender.
What can we expect here today? A small protest now? Are we expecting more people?
I hope so. I really hope so. That I saw a lot of Israelis that were passing by in their cars. They were sending us some signals of support, and I believe that this protest will grow. That people will see that we are here. We are standing with Ukraine. We need to put pressure on Russian government, but we need to move only with legal movements. We need to make only legal government on this criminal regime.
Thank you very much, Michael. Obviously, we see that you're very touched by this. Thank you very much for being with us. These are the voices. You hear them, David, here outside the Russian embassy. As far as Israel is concerned, another call this morning, both by a foreign minister, Yair Lapid, and the Israeli ambassador in Ukraine, calling on all Israelis there, about 8,000 or so, to leave as soon as possible. Leaving from the air at the is no longer possible. Therefore, the embassy itself was moved from the city of Kyiv, the capital in the center of the country, to the city of Lvov in western Ukraine, very close to the Polish border. And the call is on all Israelis to get there as much as possible, to leave Ukraine through land crossings, mostly to Poland. The Romanian border is also not very far. This is the call this morning coming from Israel. And the voices here, you've heard, quite surprised and shocked by the events of the past few hours.
Jonathan Reagan, thanks for the updates, and of course for bringing us that palpably emotional testimony from one of the Ukrainian protesters there outside the embassy. We'll come back to you in a bit later on. Again, some people starting to come out to protest in front of the Russian embassy in Tel Aviv now. But on the military side, some updates coming out of Ukraine. Again, live images from Kyiv on your screen here now. The reports as of this morning indicating perhaps hundreds of Ukrainian servicemen already killed in the initial Russian onslaught. Now, airstrikes, rocket barrages being reported across the country from the port of Odessa to Kyiv International Airport. Now, stories of, or at least reports emerging again of Russian missile strikes taking place, airstrikes. The Ukrainians saying that they've downed some Russian warplanes and helicopters. The Russian Defense Ministry claiming that they've neutralized, as they put it, the Ukrainian air defenses. This being footage that just emerged in the moments as we were speaking here. This is allegedly a missile that struck the airport, again, in Ukraine. This is in Kyiv. Again, reports of a Russian airborne assault on the airports and the seaports themselves, coming in from virtually all directions in Ukraine. Belarusian armored columns also joining the Russians from the north, rolling down the major highway towards Kyiv. People taking shelter, air raid sirens again. Some reports even of people fleeing the major cities, which are clearly a target at this point for what appears to be an all-out assault on Ukraine, and that according to the Ukrainian government themselves. So these are the updates here. We'll continue rolling with them as they emerge here. So much happening in this arena. We're in the studio there with our correspondents, and Owen Alterman, a senior international affairs correspondent. Owen, the Israeli angle, one we keep trying to come back to and focus on here, the dilemma between Russia, Ukraine, the United States for Israel now. What's some of the latest emerging from the government?
Yeah, I think the dilemma, frankly, David, is on hold for the moment. There's a much more pressing issue, and that's the Israelis who are in Ukraine. As I've said before in our and Jews for that matter who are in Ukraine, as I said in our broadcast before, this is a more central issue for Israel than for other countries, right? A report in the British media that there were 5,000 British nationals on the eve of the war in Ukraine, in a country that's 7 times the size of Israel. Israel, on the other hand, on the eve of the war, 10 to 15,000 Israelis, 2 to 3 times the number in a country that is 1/7 of the size of Britain, and then beyond that, 150,000 to 200,000 Jews living in the country for whom Israel feels a sense of responsibility. In the last few moments, another statement issued by Israel's foreign ministry going exactly at that, providing practical advice for Israelis inside Ukraine on what to do, telling people, as Jonathan Regev mentioned, to get to land crossings, saying that Israeli embassies in neighboring countries have put representatives on the other sides of those borders. So if you get to the Polish border, there's a representative from the Israeli embassy in Poland on that border. Same in Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and later in the day on the border with Moldova. So again, the Israeli government trying to take care of those Israelis in the country, telling them to get to those crossing points, putting out phone numbers and email addresses of the embassy, of the situation room in the foreign ministry for Israelis to register, to be in touch, and for the government to try to track them and help them and do what it can. So obviously a fluid situation. I can say one wonders, again, it's hard to level any kind of criticism at people under such a difficult situation, but I do know Romania well. I lived there for 2 years. There isn't just one major crossing point from Ukraine to Romania. There are 2. There's also a third one, we should say, which in fairness is a much more minor crossing. Assuming that both crossing points are open, why are there not representatives at both so that people can get to the one that's closest to where they live and to try to give people every avenue and every route to leave the country? But Israel, as we know, David, Israeli diplomats are known for going beyond what diplomats from other countries, what they do to help nationals, Israeli nationals who are abroad. That's going to be even more true in this situation, let alone what's going to happen with the much larger Jewish community in Ukraine. It's going to be a major, major focus for Israeli policymakers in the coming hours.
Yeah, great for the update there. Again, the Israeli government appearing to do what they can in this moment. So much developing on the ground right now. And the images on your screen, again, these are all coming out of Ukraine in the last minutes virtually here. Large explosions taking place across much of the country here. Again, that's what's on your screen here. But again, the Russians, at least their president, Vladimir Putin, justifying this all-out assault on the country, as he put it, to remove the neo-Nazis, quote unquote, in Kyiv now, as he refers to the central government of Ukraine, and he's claimed this is a peacekeeping mission, as his rhetoric has indicated there, all aimed at protecting civilians, as he puts it, in eastern Ukraine. Again, the only damage and explosions we're seeing here are coming from elsewhere in the country, but here's more from Vladimir Putin.
I have made the decision of a military operation. Dear comrades, your fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers did not fight defending our motherland for today's neo-Nazis to seize power in Ukraine. You took an oath of allegiance to the Ukrainian people and not to the anti-people junta that robs and harasses its own people. Don't follow its criminal orders. Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so, to create threats for our country, our people, should know that Russia's response will be immediate and will lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history.
Again, if you're just joining us now, this is live breaking news coverage ongoing here at I-24 News. We're continuing to cover the latest now, everything developing quickly on the ground in Ukraine. And for a bit more on the military analysis, now we're joined by security analyst Rafael Shalmi. Thanks for being with us in the studio here. What did the latest, the big picture taking place, latest reports, clearly a lot happening. What's it all look like to you? It appears to be the Russian objective at this point.
The last minute information is a terrestrial entry from Crimea, and we have the terrestrial entry from Belarus towards Kyiv. So this indicates very clearly that we are in the worst scenario possible, meaning a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine by Russia. During the night, the missiles were aimed at strategic points, mostly airports and air defense. And now that the artillery and the Air Force have done their job, the terrestrial entry is coming in, we're probably trying to see a blitz, meaning a very fast entrance in many different points into Ukraine and neutralizing of the Ukrainian military defense in a very fast, very well planned action. The Russian intel must be quite good because they know exactly where they're going and they know exactly how to neutralize on the way air defense facilities, even civilian facilities have been hit. Simultaneously, there is a cyber attack all over Ukraine, hitting all the most strategic infrastructures. So this is the worst case scenario. We are going to have to see now what is happening on the other side, because obviously the dissuasion of sanctions doesn't work. Putin is not impressed. The whole world is now going into economic chaos. I mean, the boomerang of the sanctions will be actually very fast in coming. The Russians are counting on the help of the Chinese. Anecdotally, the Chinese have told their citizens in Ukraine to drive around with a little Chinese flag on their car, meaning they will not be hit because they are the friendly force. That's the anecdote. The other anecdote that's less ironical is that there are many cities, mayors have asked people to stay home, and others have asked people to evacuate the city. Remember that in Ukraine they do not have the shelters like we have in Israel, or the training of the population to, defend themselves. And that's the next problem that the Europeans are going to face, because right now NATO is being tested. Right, and NATO is being, as usual when it's tested, very disappointing. They're not doing anything. I'm not sure they're going to do anything, but the next crisis is going to be most probably the refugee crisis. Tens of thousands of refugees fleeing westward. The question will be now, what will Europe do? Will it, as usual, close its borders? Will the Moldavians, will the Romanians, let people come out? That's why the Israelis already talked with the Russians in case, if we cannot evacuate Israeli citizens and Jews towards the west, we evacuate them through Russia. This is going to be a huge humanitarian catastrophe as well. The last question, how long will the Ukrainian army, which is weakest than the Russian army for sure, how long will they last? How long before military victory of the Russians? The flag will be put up on Kyiv. But then the second question is, how long will be the civilian resistance, the resilience of the Ukrainian people? Once the army is defeated, it doesn't mean the Russians have completely won the war. There might be a strong resistance of the Ukrainians, in which case we can enter another scenario, which will be like an Afghanistan or Vietnam scenario, where the Russians are making what many armies have done in the past, the mistake of confronting guerrilla warfare, urban guerrilla warfare.
There's so much happening, as you highlight here, Rafael Yerushalmi. Thanks for the updates there. Clearly, a lot taking place in this arena now. This is developing by the minute across Ukraine here. This is, again, as you just have it here, appears to be an all-out assault. You're watching images on your screen here. Some of the footage emerging here. We know that this has been a massive air and now land assault on the country from almost all directions here now. The Russians moving in, the Belarusians joining them from the north here. And we go back to Kyiv at this moment to Oleg Golubenko, political analyst there in Kyiv. Oleg, we spoke last hour. It appears more has taken place since that time. What else can you tell us about what you're hearing from the front lines of your country?
First of all, we have officially martial law now in our country. So, and we are ready to protect our territory, to defend. And of course, now we are trying to receive all possible support from the world. So to organize anti-Putler coalition, because only together we could stop this mad guy. Because it's a really awful thing, unbelievable. Till now, it's unbelievable because it was normal peaceful agreements all the time. But Russia denied Ukrainians as nation. Putin crazy. He's crazy, absolutely. And we have a mad neighbor. This is a problem. And of course, we haven't enough, maybe shelters, we haven't enough weapon, but we have a spirit and we are ready to protect our territory, to defend our people, our families. And of course, so each person in our country is ready, absolutely, to kill all occupants, all the soldiers who will come here. And you should understand one thing, that it's not a normal war. We're a very large country. We have more than 40 million people. And so our people would like to be free and to choose democracy values. And of course, we will be strong, and we hope for the whole world to be with us, and so to protect our ideas, our values, because it's not normal war. It will be started, the Third World War. Absolutely, it's the same ideas like Hitler had. Absolutely, but only now Ukrainians suffer from it because of the ideas of one crazy guy in Kremlin that it should not be existing. Absolutely, like country, like nation, like people.
Oleg, thanks for those updates. Stay with us. We are moving back in the studio again, just to tell anyone tuning in here, we're watching the unfolding situation here and trying to cover everything as it emerges from Ukraine. There's been reports emerging from virtually every city now of massive explosions across Ukraine. The main cities all being targeted, the airports, the seaports, certainly all the military installations for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. We have a correspondent here in the studio, Ariel Saran. Ariel, what some of the latest has been? Obviously, so much going on. What can you tell us about what appears to be happening on these front lines with the Russian troop movements? What's the latest?
Well, pretty much we're seeing all of Ukraine one front line, whether it's border cities, cities inside. If we're talking about the north, we saw earlier this morning ground tanks, troops entering pretty much without any disturbance from the Belarusian border. The Russians were not only what appears they were doing drills, combined drills with the Russian and Belarusian forces, but this was apparently preparation, not just a drill, but preparation for this ground invasion. And what's interesting about this entry point from the north, that's the fastest way to get to the capital, Kyiv. And I think what we're seeing now is a ground race to Kyiv. And one of the main missions of the Ukrainian army is to try and stop Russian forces from getting into Kyiv. We're also hearing air raid sirens in the capital, Kyiv, and Lviv in the west. They've been going off pretty much
Ariel, just to cut in to explain what our viewers are looking at here, these are purported to be images of Russian troops now already moving into the second largest city in the country, Kyiv, out in the east part of the country here. This is, again, all indicating the Russian ground troops on the move, as you're reporting.
Yeah, second largest city, and it was actually the first capital of the Ukrainian Federation, when the capital moved to Kyiv in 1934. So this is in the northeastern part of Ukraine, near the Donbass area. Kharkiv is right near the Russian border city of Belgorod, and so we're seeing already ground forces in the northeast, ground forces coming in from Belarus in the north. Also from the south, there's images of Russian forces coming in from Crimea. We're also seeing reports off the port city of Odessa, the country's third largest city, of Navy vessels on fire. Elsewhere in the east, throughout the night there were rocket barrages in the regions of Donetsk, Lugansk, and as well as currently this morning we're seeing Russian Air Force acting in the Donbass. In the west, there were the air raid sirens in Lvov, and also the airfield of Frankivsk in the west was struck too. So all across the country, city of Uman also inside, every major city in the country has appeared to become under fire. Ukraine is one big front line at the moment.
It's somewhat staggering here, as we clearly cannot keep up with everything taking place. Likely neither can the Ukrainians. Attacks taking place in every corner of their large country here, from the sea, from the land, from the air. Appears to be, as our correspondents have been covering here, an all-out assault on the government in Kyiv. Now, developments happening rapidly on the ground, taking place rapidly now. This appears to be the goal. Again, we're covering it based on all the latest reports here, the explosions being reported, the footage emerging. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry saying that they've been taking out Russian warplanes from the sky. The Russians, for their part, saying that they've neutralized the Ukrainian air defenses. And so much happening now in the international arena. such an important factor at this point here. All eyes looking certainly to the west, but we have Owen Alterman in the studio here still. Owen, what's the latest?
Yeah, a couple quick updates from here in Israel, David. We were told earlier this morning by the Foreign Ministry that the Foreign Minister Yair Lapid would hold a situational assessment. That's maybe the best translation from the Hebrew at 10 o'clock local time, so in a half an hour, assuming that's still on. We've also heard that the Foreign Minister, this is not uninteresting, will be giving a press conference at 12 o'clock local time on the situation in Ukraine. 2.5 hours from when you're nodding, because it promises to be a very interesting press conference, especially if there are questions from reporters, because he will not be able to evade, at least not the question. It may, by his answer, be able to be evasive about Israel's position on the conflict and on the war. As we all know, Israel has been very, very careful in terms of what it said, waited until yesterday to put out even a very carefully worded statement, as I often compared on our air, like a page of Talmud where you have the text in the middle and need the commentary all around it to decipher what it means. That was put out to try to strike the Israeli balance between its alliance to the United States, the need for ties with Russia given the Russian presence in Syria. So Lapid may not be able to escape taking some position on that. Of course, what's front and center for Israeli policymakers is a legitimate issue in its own right are the Israeli nationals and the Jews inside the country. As I said earlier, larger number per capita in Israel than elsewhere. Specific instructions from the foreign ministry to Israelis to get to border crossings in the West. Israeli embassies in those countries in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, later in the day in Moldova, putting representatives on the other side of those border crossings to absorb the Israelis, giving practical information to Israelis inside the country about what to do.
And when you bring up this working relationship with Russia that's been so critical for Israel, we've seen that allegedly on display again overnight here. Syrian media reporting overnight as this Russian assault was taking place on Ukraine that an alleged Israeli strike took place outside Damascus. Again, this is Russia's backyard militarily here. The Russian military is so
and Israel's backyard
dominant.
Geographically.
Yes, and so clearly that aspect of the relationship between Israel and Russia as relevant as ever, and perhaps more sensitive than ever. We've seen some ups and downs.
An understatement.
So that likely to be a heavy topic or hot topic at this press conference in about 30 minutes here with the foreign ministry.
2.5 hours. 12 o'clock. The situational assessment at 10 o'clock this morning.
We'll keep our viewers involved with all of that now. So this is, again, you're seeing some of the alleged images that emerged. 3 soldiers killed, according to Syrian state media there in this alleged Israeli strike. Again, overnight near Damascus, an area where the skies are virtually controlled by the Russians. It appears Ukraine is also now an area where the Russians are controlling the skies here. We know that there's been now no civilian traffic in the air over Ukraine here. The reports of airstrikes ongoing. Now a land incursion as well coming in from Crimea, coming in from the north in Belarus, and of course the east, where troops have been amassing for weeks and weeks. And we have the New York Times Moscow correspondent Ivan Necheparenko, thanks for joining us here. Ivan, so much happening right now. What's being said inside Russia about the nature of these moves against what Vladimir Putin calls neo-Nazis in Kyiv?
Well, I think most Russians woke up in shock today because despite all the earlier reports about that happening, I think most people, even those who are critical of President Vladimir Putin, have been very skeptical. They wouldn't believe that Russia would wage a war against what many Russians believe is a brotherly nation. So I think there's a lot of shock. And basically, people think about what Russia will be like as a country after this happens, because it's not just a war in Ukraine, but clearly that this will be continued with some measures inside the country too, because many people are already calling for protests, and many people are saying that this is the most shameful event of their lives.
Dramatic sentiments coming out of Russia here. We know Vladimir Putin in power for some 22 years. It appears he's had virtually no domestic public constraints on the behavior of his military or his orders for it now. Is that equation in place, or is there a risk of popular protests in Red Square?
Well, I think what we saw from President Vladimir Putin's meeting with his top security officials is that even his top security lieutenants were not quite sure that the decision he made is the right course of action. So I would expect that the main point of contention to be among the elites, because now is the point where all people Okay, so I think for many members of the elite, the so-called technocrats, the liberals, this will be a very, very difficult choice. So I would expect some tensions there.
Ivan, are you getting different reports inside Russia than what we're seeing about essentially an all-out assault from almost every direction on Ukraine right now? Troops coming out of Crimea, coming out of Belarus, coming out of the east. Does it appear to be an all-out assault on a regime change operation for Ukraine?
Well, the Russian Defense Ministry just issued a statement saying that they have suppressed Ukrainian air defense missiles and that they have rendered all Ukrainian military airfields inoperable. So that means that they have launched an all-out assault on the whole country because Ukraine has airfields all across the country. So that basically confirms that, yes.
Ivan, thanks for the reports here. Again, coming out of Russia, we do have some updates. Ukrainian authorities saying that at least seven people have been killed. We don't know the nature of exactly where or what, but so much footage of these missile strikes. You just saw one of them on your screen there. Clearly, casualties are taking place across Ukraine. We go back to Kyiv now, where Oleg Golobenko joining us now. Oleg, some confirmation from your government now of people being killed in this conflict. What's the nature of it and how many?
We don't know exactly because there are a lot of fake news, especially came from Russia. We know that they used propaganda like Hitler used before. It's absolutely the same, and they're telling a lot of fake things. We should hear only officials, our officials, and of course, because the main idea of Russia is to organize panic here, and of course they could provide different fake news, and they made it a lot of them. Because of propaganda, but really, so I don't know exactly what happened because it's only so each half an hour we have breaking news officials, and so we are trying to protect and to change a lot, and I don't know a lot. Of course, it's difficult because we don't know exactly what to do because we're not expected like something like this, like such attack. And so I hope that we have enough time to prepare because our army is defending now. And sometimes we could hear even these explosions of them. It's working of our anti-plane system. And so it was reported a lot of Russian planes were shot, and the helicopter. Really, I try to believe to our officials, not to Russian propaganda, because that's why I don't know exactly what we have. And this is a situation. It's rather difficult for us.
Yes, you talk about this misinformation campaign. There's reports of a cyber assault on the country as well. Are you seeing signs of that? And Oleg, on top of that, is the discussion changing among you and your neighbors here? Is there a calculation in place about whether to stay, whether to go? We understand there's been some conflicting policies across the country from even the mayors. Some places being told to stay, some places told to evacuate.
Yeah, so we were not ready, really. This is a problem because we are not prepared. So, for example, Israel is in the war for a long term. Yeah, so we are not accustomed for such yet for such mad neighbor. So we will be stronger, of course. And I really believe in our army and in our people. And we are ready to protect. And so, to tell the truth, we don't know what to do, really. A lot of us don't know what to do. Me, personally, I know what to do, and so I will be protect and defend. Of course. And so I hope that we will receive normal instructions what to do and what should we do. Now, the main activity is from our army. This is the main idea for us because they are professionals. They know what to do. We have a lot of soldiers. We have a lot of people with war experience, and so I hope that with the help of all the world, we will stop this fascist regime of Putin and Lukashenko.
Oleg Golobenko again in Kyiv. Thanks for being with us on the latest. There we are, still with Ivan Necheprenko from the New York Times in Russia. You mentioned some of the shock this morning, Ivan, as people woke up to this news. What exactly is being fed to the people of Russia right now? Is it all state media? Or do they have access to foreign media outlets in terms of where they're getting their updates and what is the news there?
Well, of course, the state media is portraying this not as a war, but as a military operation against, as you said, I think, Nazis. in Ukraine. They
Vladimir Putin's
rewind
words,
and
yes.
Yes, and they broadcast. This is what I was about to say. That they just broadcast his statement over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at outside this state-run bubble, if you look at social networks, of course, people say and report different things. Many people in Russia have relatives in Ukraine. For instance, I myself is half Ukrainian, half Russian. So I have relatives and friends there. So for many people, it's a personal matter, really, and they can get reports from the other side of what is happening there. So it's a difficult situation for the country.
Yvonne, thank you again for the updates coming to us from Russia now. Just to recap a bit now, if I can, for our viewers who may be tuning in. Again, yes, thank you, Yvonne. That's Breko coming to us from Russia there. This is all how the world woke up today to see the assault begin on Ukraine here. Vladimir Putin declaring the beginning of what he termed a special military operation. Now there are casualties being reported. The European Union making a statement. Let's listen in.
President of the European Council, President Michel, has called for a meeting of the European Council this evening, and they will agree and provide political guidance to adopt the stronger package, the harshest package of sanctions we have ever implemented. As High Representative for the Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union, I will be in touch with our partners around the world to ensure the international community will be fully grasping the gravity of the moment and to call strongly and united on Russia to cease immediately this behavior, intolerable behavior, and Russian leadership will face unprecedented isolation. This is not a question of blocks. This is not a question of diplomatic power games. It's a matter of life and death. It's about the future of our global community. And we will stand united with our transatlantic partners and with all European nations in defending this position. We stand united in saying that no violence and destruction as means to obtain political gains. We, the European Union, remain the stronger group of nations in the world, and this should not be underestimated. More immediately, we will be designing urgent assistance to Ukraine in this dire situation. We will also be active in supporting evacuation operations, including of our own staff in zones affected by this Russian attack. The European Union, together with transatlantic and like-minded partners, have made unprecedented efforts to achieve a diplomatic solution to the security crisis caused by Russia. But Russia has not reciprocated these efforts and instead has opted unilaterally for a grave and premeditated escalation, conducting to war. President Putin needs to stop this senseless aggression. And today our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. We will stand with them.
Again, you're watching statements from the European Union here again as they stake out their position. Again, no change really, trying to dissuade President Putin with their harsh rhetoric now from the ongoing, as far as we can tell from reports, full assault from all directions almost on Ukraine here now. The ports, the airports and the seaports under attack. We are in the studio still looking at the situation at large, certainly as the Israeli government may be involved here. Actually, we'll be back with much more. We're stepping out for some break here. We'll continue our live coverage there. This is a fluid situation we're also trying to keep up with like the rest of the world here. War underway in Ukraine, the Russian assault. As the Ukrainian government puts it, full-scale invasion underway. Reports indicate Russian troops crossing the borders from Crimea, from the east and from the north alongside the Belarusians. We'll keep you updated for now on the breaking war in Ukraine here from I-24 News.
I-24 News team of talented correspondents are working hard for you. They're in the markets, on the streets, in the battlefields, getting the pulse of the story. Tune in for Beyond the Headlines to see how the top stories of the week are affecting real people. No commentary, no debate, just the best stories presented by our best journalists.